This is what the Eastern Conference wildcard standings looks like on this morning, Saturday, March 21st. You can see that the Red Wings and the Boston Bruins are tied in overall points and games played. The Islanders are breathing down their neck with 1 point fewer, and the Columbus Blue Jackets have stolen that third Metro spot. The Montreal Canadiens are third in the Atlantic, holding on to this spot in the postseason. But the Bruins, the Wings, the Isles, and the Blue Jackets are all making it difficult. Things are very rough right now. And today, the Boston Bruins will be playing off against the Detroit Red Wings in what is going to be the most important game of the year up to this point. That will be going on later this evening. But unfortunately, I am out and about on vacation, so I'm not actually going to be able to watch this game. Instead, what I wanted to do was go over some Detroit Red Wings notes and an article posted onto dailyfaceoff.com that critiques said Red Wings in the midst of this playoff hunt. Now, panic is going to settle in, I think, for many Red Wings fans that are watching this team, especially heading into today's contest against Boston. Both of these teams are 38-23-8. Both of these teams have 84 points in 69 games. The Wings have won 2 in a row. The Bruins won their most recent game. It's super tight, especially here with 13 games remaining in the regular season for either squad. But with all that said, let's go out there and dive into this piece posted onto dailyfaceoff.com, because I do think there are a number of things that you can agree and disagree with. Take a look at what Anthony DeMarco posted on Daily Faceoff yesterday. The Detroit Red Wings are not all in enough, and it could cost them a playoff spot. Now, that's a pretty interesting way to start out a piece. They're not all in enough. What exactly does that mean? Well, all in to me means total disregard for the future, long term and beyond, and a huge emphasis on what is going on today. If the Detroit Red Wings were to go all in to the most all-in capacity that they could be, you would probably see them go out there and make a number of trades involving prospects to get pieces that can help them in the playoffs this year. But let's go out there and read what DeMarco's pitch is as to why they haven't been all in. The Red Wings have been plugging along in a rebuild for nearly a decade. For the last 2 seasons, the playoffs have seemed within reach. Ultimately, though, poor stretches in March derailed those hopes. This year seemed to be different, but old habits have reared their ugly head. To be fair, the Wings have won 2 straight games, including Thursday night's clash with the division rival Montreal Canadiens. Despite the back-to-back wins, the Wings are still clinging onto the second wildcard seed and final playoff spot in the East. The Islanders are nipping at their heels, just 1 point behind, and the Sens trail by just 5 points with a game in hand. Yes, the Wings are still in a rebuild of sorts, but would missing out on yet another playoff berth be the final straw for Yzerman? Now, that's really dramatic, the way that the article says that. But it does clarify later on that, hey, I'm not suggesting that Yzerman is on the hot seat. Nothing ever leaks out of Detroit, but there has been no indication that Yzerman or his staff are on thin ice. Were the Wings one of the teams rumored to be in on St. Louis center Robert Thomas? As previously mentioned, anything Detroit-related is always kept tight to the vest, but whether they were or not, failing to successfully pursue a player of Thomas's caliber is a major miss by Yzerman. This seems to be the main thesis of what this article proposes, is that Stevie Y and the Detroit Red Wings did not do as many trades, or did not make as big of a trade, or 2 or 3, as they maybe could have. Speaking with one executive whose team had trade discussions with Yzerman around the deadline, the Wings were not willing to move any of their top prospects in center Nate Danielson and goaltenders Kosa and Augustine in any trade. I am admittedly not a prospect guy, so take this with a grain of salt, but is there really no scenario where any of the aforementioned prospects could have been worthwhile to move? The price set on Thomas was astronomical, Speaking with one GM, it was close to the equivalent of 4 first-round picks. No team stepped up to pay the price for Thomas, but if any team could have, it was the Red Wings. Huh. That is a very intriguing idea here. This is what the article proposes. It's hard to believe that Doug Armstrong wouldn't have budged had Yzerman presented him with a package including a first, Danielson, and one of Augustin or Kosa. Oh, man. Look, I'm just going to go out there and say this. I like Robert Thomas as a player. We have made videos about him throughout the course of the season. As a trade target, as a pending player to get moved, he is still in St. Louis. He's on a pretty decent contract, and he's been a consistent 70 to 80 point guy the past few years, spare this season, of course. But you're off your marbles if you think that Robert Thomas is going to go for the same price that Quinn Hughes went for, essentially. And that guy was a rental. Thomas is long-term, so I can understand why you might place a little bit more value on Thomas, but still, that's a beefy package. And I disagree with the idea here that says, oh yeah, well, the Red Wings are costing them a playoff spot because they're not going all in enough. Here's the point about the Red Wings and what they're doing right now. They are, technically, towards the end of a rebuild. If they miss out on the playoffs, I honestly do not think that it's all the end of the world here. They are in the thick of it. Everybody knows. And all it takes is getting a little bit more wins at the right opportune times for them to squeak in and get themselves a playoff berth. If they make the playoffs, does that invalidate the entire point that this article is making? I honestly kind of think so. Because essentially they're saying, oh yeah, well, the Red Wings were not willing to trade away all these prospects. Danielson, Kosa, Augustine, and now what? Guess what? They didn't make the playoffs because of it. Wah, wah. If they make the playoffs, then it's okay, right? All they gotta do is make the playoffs and keep these guys to show that they're actually on a proper path to building a team for the future. This article was posted onto the Detroit Red Wings subreddit, and understandably so, it's greeted with 0 upvotes. The article says that the Red Wings are costing themselves, but this commenter says he doesn't agree with it. The team is better than last year. Yzerman is making moves. Falk and Gibson have been excellent acquisitions. The drafting has been fantastic. Seider and Raymond have great contracts. Yzerman has done everything asked of a good GM. The team has 84 points, and the only reason this not doing enough narrative exists is because the division is extremely competitive. It won't be that way forever. The Bruins should be on the way down. Teams like the Sens have mortgaged their future and won't be hanging around forever. Yzerman is patient, and if we as fans can also be patient, I think it'll pay off. The Red Wings are on pace for 100 points. They spent a first, a third, a potential third, and a fourth on a decent prospect in Buchelnikov at the deadline. Apparently it's not all in enough. Yeah, okay, apparently the writer thinks that we didn't try hard enough because we didn't completely empty the cupboards at the deadline for players that didn't even end up moving, like Robert Thomas. And I do think that you can say, oh, it was a missed opportunity to not go out there and get this dude. But nobody ended up getting this dude. He's still a Blue. He is still available. If the Red Wings miraculously squeak in, they beat Boston today, they end up finding themselves the second or whatever wildcard spot is available to them, and let's say the Wings win a round or 2. If they make the 3rd round this season with a team that is essentially at the very end of a rebuild and at the start of a competitive window, then maybe this summer would be the time to go out there and get a Robert Thomas in a big blockbuster trade. Maybe at that point it's a lot easier to say, okay, let's actually go all in now because we have insurance that this team is good enough to compete and be a championship caliber squad. Maybe at that point it's possible. But for now, the Wings are coming off the end of a rebuild. They're the best they've been in a long time. And the notion that they didn't go hard enough for guys like Robert Thomas at the deadline, I do think is a little bit short-sighted, which is why I wanted to go out there and talk about it here in today's video. So, with that said, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. This article is going to be linked in the description for your reading pleasure. Go out there and support Daily Faceoff and Anthony DeBarco. Thoughts in the comment section. Do you think the Red Wings had gone all in enough? And do you think there was more to be had? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.